Welcome back. Today we're diving into the whole idea of trauma-informed workplaces in the legal profession, sort of like rethinking everything from supervision practices to even office design so that both clients and lawyers are, you know, safer and more supported, right?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating how trauma, which they even call the legal profession's asbestos problem, has so many layers. It's not just about clients, but also about safeguarding lawyers from the secondary effects of exposure.
Exactly. Think about it. It's like um, if you're working every day in an environment where traumatic cases pile up and the culture even tolerates bullying or that kind of toxic behavior, it's bound to wear on you. Trauma-informed practices really aim to change that by emphasizing safety, transparency, and support at every level.
Right, so when we say trauma informed, we're not only talking about treating clients with care, but really transforming the whole organization. And that touches on things like training supervisors in trauma theory, creating a no tolerance policy against bullying and harassment, and even rethinking billing targets that fuel excessive competition.
Yes, absolutely. It's like when you create a system that treats, say, a no toxicity policy as essential as PPE in a dangerous environment, you're not just protecting the individual lawyer's mental health, but also boosting overall performance.
I hear
And the
you.
literature outlines, a comprehensive approach from education and trauma-informed supervision to mentoring and coaching strategies.
It's pretty revolutionary, but I'm curious, how do these initiatives actually play out day to day in legal firms? I mean, it's one thing to have policies on paper, and another thing to change a deeply rooted competitive culture.
Great point. Practically speaking, many initiatives start with things like comprehensive training or CPD sessions that specifically target trauma awareness and stress management. Also, supervisory sessions become more reflective rather than just focusing on case outcomes. It's like supervisors are encouraged to check in with lawyers on how they're feeling
Yeah,
about
exactly.
specific cases, not just ticking off workload targets.
I can see that. And then there's the idea, of integrating trauma aware practices into everyday processes, like reducing excessive billable hours that really fuel burnout and instead creating a supportive, collaborative environment.
Yes, and when you think about it, legal practice has been um, one of the last fields to adopt these kinds of systemic changes. But the evidence, like from the SAMHSA 4Rs framework and other trauma models, really supports making these changes. The goal is to realize the impact of trauma on both staff and clients, recognize the signs, resist re-traumatization, and respond with, real systemic shifts.
That 4 Rs really encapsulates it. I mean, it's a holistic approach, almost like a health and safety standard for the mind. But given the inherent resistance in some of these traditional law firm cultures, do you think senior lawyers truly embrace the concept?
That's a tricky point. There is definitely some hesitancy, especially among senior lawyers who might view these trauma-informed policies as change for change's sake, or even worry that focus on emotional well-being could undermine the rigor of legal practice. However, the research shows that these changes actually enhance performance. It's like embracing self-care doesn't reduce your ability to be sharp. It can actually improve legal advocacy
I
and
get that,
decision
yeah.
making.
I guess it also touches on the challenge of balancing financial pressures with well being. For instance, strict billing targets can create an atmosphere of overwork and competition. It's almost ironic, losing sight of the fact that if lawyers aren't well, client service is bound to suffer.
Absolutely. It's a bit like trying to run a marathon with no water. When the organization reduces that unhealthy competition and instead emphasizes collaboration and support, like peer mentoring and trauma-informed supervision, it's not only better for lawyers, but can actually improve client outcomes. And yes, research even notes that clients feel more secure when they sense that their lawyer is not distracted by their own stress.
Right, because when lawyers are calmer, more reflective, and truly supported by their team and leaders, they're more capable of empathizing accurately with clients without getting overwhelmed by it themselves.
Exactly. And speaking of supervision, the chapter really dives into models like trauma-informed supervision and even touches on things like clinical supervision strategies that encourage reflective practice. One example is that early supervision session where a new lawyer is encouraged, "How are you doing?" This is trauma-informed supervision, which helps normalize discussing emotional responses without feeling weak.
That's so important. It really underscores the need to separate the roles, too. A supervisor shouldn't just be the line manager pushing productivity. They need to create a supportive space where a lawyer can say, "I'm feeling triggered by this case," without fear of judgment.
Yes, and it goes beyond supervision. There's also coaching, mentoring, even reverse mentoring, where younger lawyers, who might be more in tune with trauma theory, help inform senior leadership. It's a multi-pronged approach that ultimately leads to improved mental health, less burnout, and surprisingly, even improved ethical standards.
I like that idea of reverse mentoring. It adds a fresh perspective and might, gently challenge the status quo. Although I wonder if that might also produce some friction among those who feel their expertise is being questioned.
That's a valid concern, and it's where respectful dialogue is key. It should be seen as a collaborative effort, not as an indictment on anyone's ability. Change is collective. If everyone is working together to foster a culture that truly protects psychological safety, then over time those old habits can shift.
Right, exactly. This transformation is also supported by the organizational change frameworks mentioned, like the 3 stages, from pre-implementation consultation to full implementation, and then ongoing adaptation. It's interesting how even things like office design are considered, ensuring the waiting room and lawyer offices are calm, non-triggering spaces.
Yes, that's one of the really neat aspects. It goes to show that trauma-informed systems aren't just piecemeal policies. They are systemic. They require assessing things like workplace communications, environmental factors, workload management, and then even something as seemingly small as what's on your computer screensaver, which might trigger employment.
Little details add up. And then there's the emphasis on reducing stigma through open conversations about mental health. I mean, surveys showing that like 2 in 5 lawyers can't talk about well-being issues with their employer. Clearly, that silence can be very damaging.
Absolutely. Breaking that stigma is fundamental. When leaders and supervisors share their own vulnerabilities within healthy boundaries, it normalizes self-care discussions. It's akin to saying, "Hey, I'm human too, and it's okay to need support." That humanizes the process and builds a trusted environment.
And that, in turn, can lead to far fewer instances of toxic behavior such as bullying or harassment. When everyone feels safe, it reinforces a culture that values respect and care over cutthroat competition.
Definitely. And another important aspect is the legal liability component. You see, in some cases, if legal employers ignore these issues, it can even result in lawsuits, compensation claims, and reputational harm. So there's a very practical legal business argument for implementing these changes.
Yep, the costs can be huge. It sounds like the chapter makes a pretty strong case for the return on investment. Like for every dollar invested in mental well-being, there's a significant gain overall. That's hard to argue against in hard numbers.
Exactly, it's a win-win situation. Not only do trauma-informed practices enhance lawyer well-being and reduce burnout, but they also lead to better client services and improved performance across the board. And ultimately, that can shift the whole culture of legal practice towards being more humane and effective.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, the take-home message is that trauma-informed legal practice isn't just about, being nice or soft. It's actually a necessary strategic shift that addresses deep-seated systemic issues like workload management, organizational communication, and leadership behavior that, if ignored, can have real negative consequences for both staff and clients.
Yeah, exactly. It's a comprehensive strategy that touches on multiple aspects: educating staff, rethinking supervisors and leaders' roles, utilizing practical tools from models like SAMHSA's framework, and the various appendices like the OTIPs and others mentioned, and even reimagining physical spaces to be calming.
It's a total cultural overhaul. It's impressive how even the design of a building can play a role. from ensuring that waiting rooms are not overstimulating to making sure that private offices cater to a lawyer's need for, like, personal space and safety. Those kinds of changes might seem minor, but they add up over time.
Absolutely. It's the attention to detail that matters here, since trauma is not always about big traumatic events, but also about the accumulation of stressors in the environment. And by addressing these, organizations can really mitigate what might otherwise lead to more serious issues like compassion fatigue or even vicarious trauma.
It really ties back to the idea that the legal profession is just too entrenched in outdated models of work and competitiveness. There's a clear call here for a paradigm shift.
Yes, and while it may feel like a big leap, incremental steps, like starting with improved supervision, better CPD sessions, and clear staff consultation, can make a significant difference over time. Leaders need to be proactive and sometimes even challenge their own assumptions
Spot
about
on.
what hard work means. Hard.
And that challenge, though, requires a fair bit of humility from those at the top. Since really, if leaders aren't willing to walk the talk, none of these initiatives will stick.
Exactly. It's about modeling the behavior you want to see. When leaders admit they might need support too, it sets the tone for an environment where seeking help isn't seen as a weakness, but as a normal, healthy practice.
That makes a lot of sense. It seems like trauma-informed practices have the potential to not only reduce rates of burnout and secondary trauma, but also to fundamentally enhance ethical practice and client advocacy.
Precisely, it's all interconnected. Taking care of lawyers so they can perform optimally means better outcomes for clients and a more just system overall. It's inspiring to see these initiatives coming up, even
Absolutely.
if change happens slowly.
Well, it looks like trauma-informed practices represent not just a reform of procedures, but a cultural evolution in legal work. And I suspect we'll be hearing more about this as the research continues to back it up.
Definitely. It's all about creating a reflective and supportive environment where every individual feels heard and safe, so that in turn, the legal system itself becomes more resilient and effective at delivering justice.
Thanks for this insightful discussion. It really opens our eyes to the transformative potential of making legal workplaces trauma-informed. Here's hoping more firms start embracing these shifts soon.